Sharing our stories makes us stronger and brings us closer together. So, here's to the strong women. May we know them, the podcast. I'm your host, Meghan Lucas. I'm a coach, a published author, and a speaker, but more so I like to create spaces for the messy parts of our stories to be celebrated and supported, because we are stronger together. In this episode, Lauren's story highlights the science behind how our bodies are impacted by nervous system dysregulation and why having the right tools are vital for any high-stress scenario.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the May We Know Them podcast. I'm your host, Meghan Lucas. So excited for you to be here with us again today. If this is your first time with us, I have some housekeeping rules for you, and it's all just to benefit your experience, so you're welcome. What I recommend for anyone hopping on here is to have a piece of paper and something to write with in close proximity, and just write down anything that's said today that really strikes a chord with you, positive or negative. If it causes you to wrinkle up your nose and be like, oh, I don't think so, just sit with it. Just sit with it. It might do something for you in a few days, in a few weeks, or months down the road. And if it does, come back and comment and tell us about it. My guest today, Lauren, I'm so excited for you to be with her in this conversation today. Lauren is, gosh, you'll hear it in her voice. She is beautiful from the inside out. Like, there is such a radiating power from her, but also like so much grace, and both of which I think are so vital to the conversation we're going to be having today around the postpartum period of motherhood, which is, as somebody who's been through it, and for a number of our listeners have been through it, it's like so much that you're just not even prepared for. Like, you're just not educated about. And I know a lot of that is actually like what Lauren's doing in the world now, is shining light on things, and the way in which she does it, because it's her, is just so beautiful to watch. So thank you for being here with us for this conversation. And Lauren, thank you for being here to have this conversation with us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You're going to make me cry already.
You're not the first to say that. And I'm not sorry. It's all the truth. It's all the truth. So, I know where you are now in your life, and, having been a mom for a few years now. And, I'm sure it feels like you blinked and you were right back to like where that whole period started for you. So,
Yes.
Talk to us a little bit about like that season of new motherhood, what you were going through, what you were noticing, what you were thinking. I mean, sometimes, what's going on in our head and our bodies is disconnected. We got to like get reconnected to that. So just paint a picture for us.
Yeah. And I think it's important to go back to just a little bit before motherhood.
Sure.
I was single, hyper independent, which I didn't realize was like a childhood trauma response.
I resonate. Yep.
You think you can do everything on your own. You don't need a village support, right? Going into, I was pregnant, and it was, gosh, I found out I was pregnant on my 30th birthday, December 2019. So you can think of the time frame there.
Yeah, we probably all remember where we were at that moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
So navigating that, it felt like it would be a normal pregnancy where you'd have your friends around and family would come and visit. And I didn't live by my family anymore. I moved from Pittsburgh, just like Meghan, to Rhode Island in 2018. And so, I had already created a community of friends. I felt very lucky. When they say it's hard to make adult friends, I just kind of felt like I went to the right place at the right time, where I started meeting friends and felt really good. But then we all know March 2020 began to happen. And, I started we all working from home all the time. All of a sudden, a lot of those friends I had became really silent, and everyone started getting into their own way of dealing with that fear and uncertainty. And I wasn't really in anyone's bubble of, besides like my boyfriend, now husband. It was just the two of us at that point where we felt comfortable being around each other. And me being pregnant and doctors knowing so little, my OBGYN just said, just keep it to the two of you. That's it. Uh, and so that already started to really trigger the anxiety and that like hypervigilance that I've had my whole life. And some of that served me and some of it didn't, because I was valedictorian, class president, National Honor Society president, like overachiever 4.0, all of that stuff. There's ways that does serve, but it was very much always at the expense of my body and my nervous system. And I didn't understand it. I knew I was stressed out, but it didn't start having implications on my health quite yet, until, then I start carrying a child and growing a child. And that takes up so much energy of your body. So it's, things started to quickly kind of crumble with my health. And so I made it through the pregnancy fine. I definitely started having, it's like, we all think of postpartum depression and anxiety. I had prenatal depression and anxiety. I had to take time off of work and go to a program that supported it was also the prenatal depression and anxiety, but it was mostly targeted for the postpartum depression and anxiety. And I felt really alone. I was the only one who was there that was pregnant. And it was all virtual because of COVID. And it was just very, it wasn't really helping. But I think the time off of work helped more than anything to just kind of nest and just rest and take care of myself. Things that I didn't really have a lot of opportunities for. I have a corporate job where I'm on Zoom calls back to back to back, and always have to be on and have the right answer and guide everyone and always be right. And it was so vital that I had that break from that.
Sure.
But so my anxiety was already starting to get to this breaking point. Then I have a pretty traumatic birth. So his due date came and went in August 2020. And I remember, my own mother was 2 weeks late with me. And so I was saying to my doctors, like, well, my mom was 2 weeks late with me, right? And they were like, well, it's 1989. Like, they probably weren't right. And so they were telling me I was going to kill my child if I didn't get induced.
Oh boy.
The next day but then they had just monitored me that we were both fine.
Yeah.
Right. So it was just a lot of like fear, and I was starting to understand like and I don't say that this is a general statement for everywhere, but I think there's still very much a control sort of vibe towards women in the medical system specifically. Because even when we did get induced, I found even a lot of the doctors that we'd have on rotation, because my induction took 4 days. And it was just true medical torture, in my experience. I'm not saying it would be for anyone else, but it was for me, because nothing they were doing was working. So they just kind of kept escalating, and I didn't want it to be happening.
Yeah.
So, I found a lot of the doctors still just speaking to Matt, my now husband, rather than me, and, telling me that they know better than me what I would want and all of those things. And I remember it was like the night of the third day of the induction, and a new doctor came in and said, oh, why are you even here? You should just go home and let it just naturally happen. And I stood up and I screamed and I said, that's it. I'm out of here. You all are nuts. Like, I'm not dealing with this anymore. And my water just whoosh, like the movie. They were like, okay, I guess you're not leaving now. And so because none of this was really natural, I pushed with my son for 4 hours. It didn't feel like 4 hours, but it was. It was just my body just wasn't ready yet, you know? So, so that was, I started motherhood on 0, like empty.
Yes.
And, so then going right into learning to breastfeed, and then waking up, you're getting all the disrupted sleep, and you're not used to that yet. And it's like my body deeply needed to rest for probably like a day. And that's just, you just can't.
You just can't. Yeah.
You know, so I would say I first started feeling like I had like the baby blues maybe a few days after birth, which I had heard was normal. I did have a doula, a birth doula with me. I didn't have a postpartum doula, which, gosh, I would have loved to have had that in hindsight. But you know, so I kind of knew like that would be normal. You know, my now husband Matt, he had like a month off of work with me. And so we got into like a really good routine though. You know, I did start getting more rest, and we had really nice shifts where, you know, I knew I could be totally off and he could be totally off. And, you know, so we got into this groove. But as soon as he went back to work, there was no more, all of a sudden the shifts went away, which we had to figure that out again. Right. Like,
Right.
because I started crashing, like my body was just so exhausted and depleted. And that's when I started having so much anxiety, and I felt myself starting to be really hypervigilant with Liam, my son. And, you know, put my finger under his nose to see if he's still breathing. And, you know, like I felt like, is someone going to come in our house or, you know, we'll have apartment at the time at night, and started having these thoughts that I've never had before.
Yeah. Intrusive thoughts are no joke.
Yeah, and they're no joke. And so even if I had opportunities to rest, I couldn't, you know, that saying of sleep when the baby sleeps, like it's not that easy. I wish that could be the case. But then also when you had no one around and it's still like 2020 of the pandemic, like there was no one around to help with any chores. Like I'm just doing everything and just getting more and more depleted, to the point where I think by the time Liam was 3 months old, I felt like I could barely hold him. And I was getting dizzy constantly. And I didn't know why. Everyone was like, you must not be eating enough, or like eat more often. And I did that. And all that happened was that I gained weight. You know, it wasn't that. Once I started doing a bit of learning about breath work, and I started taking deep breaths and like really calming my nervous system, the dizziness would go away. I was like, this is just anxiety. Like this is, I think I used the term, feel like my fight or flight system in my body is turned all the way up, but the knob is broken, or the knob's been like taken off fully and I can't get it back down. Like, and that's what it felt like. And gosh, I just want to like go back in time and give myself a hug, just like, because I've spent years, and you know, all I do really is like research and learn techniques for these things to help other people, and even my future self if we have another child. But I just had no tools to understand nervous system regulation. I had heard the term adrenal fatigue before, but I didn't fully get it. I just thought that meant people were tired.
Right.
But like it's more adrenal dysfunction. It's where cortisol, your stress hormone, should not constantly be elevated. It's supposed to be elevated when you're running away from a tiger, not when, you know, everything in the world makes you nervous all the time. Like that's not biologically what's meant to be happening. Right. So but your body doesn't know the difference. If, you know, if something was traumatic for you and it's like your fight or flight's on all the time, there's physical implications. It's not something that's just all in your head, that anxiety. When you're pumping out all these stress hormones like adrenaline, cortisol, it releases glucose from your body, from your, like, shouldn't say from your body, from your blood into your bloodstream constantly. And so I was eating super healthy. I was like this big plant-based like health coach before this, which I've totally changed my views on, but of what health is. But I mean, I wasn't eating junk food and refined sugar and all of these things. And I started getting insulin resistance from eating and I was eating super healthy. And it didn't matter. It was this constant stress hormones coming out. And then I couldn't lose the weight. So I had to learn what insulin resistance was, and this whole adrenal dysfunction thing. And let's say by like, gosh, I had a miscarriage end of January 2021. And after that was so, because I was already in this state
Yeah.
I mean, that just kind of tipped me over the edge where I started
That's
having
icing on the cake.
insomnia.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Oh my God.
cortisol was definitely just running all the time because I couldn't sleep. I mean, it'd be 1 a.m. and I'm just trying to will myself to sleep and get so upset that I couldn't sleep. And so, yeah, I mean, that lasted like a year and a half.
Let's pause there and just because there's so much. Thank you for speaking about prenatal depression.
Yeah. Yeah. No
Um,
one talks about it, right?
no,
Like,
that's the first I've heard of it.
yeah.
That's the first I've heard of it. So for anyone else here, like, here's an opportunity. We're going to lean more into that conversation at some
Mm,
point, 100%.
mhm.
Um, yeah, the period, I just resonate with the long birth process, the long induction process, and then to suddenly like go straight into motherhood and like all
Yeah,
the days run together, like you don't know where your days end or begin, and that
totally.
it's just you sharing that takes me right back there. I'm sure all of our mothers listening, it takes us right back there, like just wow. Yeah, we
Yeah.
did it. We did it somehow. But really like all of the things you figured out, like yay, we figured it out, but also like I'm really present to what like you were still caring for a child at that point,
Hmm.
figuring it out. Like when do you like research? When do you and also, I'm sure people were saying, oh, it's just this or it's just that. And like everybody coming at you with something that actually wasn't helpful,
Yes.
which just adds more to it.
Hmm.
So I mean, so there's that whole side of this that I'm sure could be a rabbit hole we go down. I'm curious for you, like, what was it that tipped you off that it was a nervous system dysregulation? It was like
Yes.
hormone imbalance. It was like, how
Yeah.
did somebody highlight that for you and you got curious, or was it research that you did? Like,
Right. I'm glad you like we paused at that exact moment because it once I started having this insomnia
mm-hmm,
and I could barely function from that. I mean, I that was like, okay, I need to find someone to help me.
yeah,
And when I started getting the clues of, I started taking some deep breaths and finding some way to calm me down. It wouldn't last very long, but it would calm me down for a minute, and I would notice that helped the dizziness. I found it's like a functional medicine doctor
mm-hmm,
that was kind of local to me, but we did virtual visits. And so she was the one who really introduced me to the hormonal aspect of this and understanding this cortisol dysregulation. And that's why I couldn't sleep. And, how that messes with all of your other hormones. Because when cortisol is elevated like that, there's something called like a cortisol steal. It steals from all your other hormones.
mm-hmm,
So suddenly you're going to have terrible periods because progesterone's super low. You start having PMS, even if you didn't ever had it before, which I never did.
mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
Maybe when I was younger as a teenager, but it messes with estrogen. It messes with testosterone. There is such a cascade effect. And so I learned that from her. I feel so grateful. Um, but I think it took me years, though, to your point of when do you research?
Yeah,
I started to understand some things, but it wasn't something that could just be solved by supplements, which is very big. That's what the functional medicine doctor is going to help you with, right? So I certainly got a little bit of help from that, and then I found a postpartum mentor. Miranda Bauer she runs Postpartum University.
okay,
So I found her when I was like really in the depths of it. Like something clicked in my head where I was just like, I've valued coaches so much. And it's funny, like I'm a business and IT coach professionally,
mm-hmm,
as well as like I was a health coach on the side and all of that. So I was just like, duh, why I bet there's postpartum coaches, right?
mm-hmm.
So I found her as a mentor. So she helped me more with understanding the trauma living in my body and the nervous system side of it, and even specifically learning about postpartum nutritional needs that are way different than just regular day to day, and how we, over the last hundreds and thousands of years, we had these rituals for when a woman gave birth, what she should be eating, how she should be taken care of. that have just totally gone away
Mhm.
in modern society. And it's like we say these things, and I think a lot of women can relate, but it's not normal and it's not supposed to be that way. And so, I mean, that's really like studying under her, and just going into other, like I've done other somatic kind of like trauma release out of your body programs as well. So it's just these past few years of learning is, this is what I want to give to women as just a one-stop shop of like, this is what you need to prepare for for having a baby. And it's not to scare anyone, it's to correct what has been missing. And I want everyone to have like this joyful, blissful experience that it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
There's actually another postpartum mentor, Dr. Serena Rosa. Maybe we can link
we'll
her
link
or
all
something.
these people.
Yeah. I worked with her for quite a bit, probably last year, for the most of last year. And, she just had her second baby, and it's just such a different experience for her.
Yeah.
Because she went through the same learning with her first baby and realizing how broken the systems are and society and like how we view, women giving birth. Like, so, I'm seeing her go through it in such a different way now.
Yeah.
And that's, I want women to just go through it so like beautifully from the get-go, you know? So yeah, I mean, it took years, and I'm still learning, but I'm finding myself, because it's taken me years and a lot of money and a lot of studying and all of these things to go through that. It's taken me longer, I would say, to get back to a really good baseline. And it's wonderful now. I no longer feel like I'm in survival mode at all.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to even question, though, like postpartum also kind of, I would say, reawakens a woman. Like there's a rebirth of you. And I would say that I've only had one child, but I have heard it's like every time you give birth, it's like you're rebirthing yourself. And so makes you even question your career that you thought was fine at the moment. And now maybe it's totally not aligned. And maybe it's like you're depressed because you're doing something that's not aligned.
Right.
So it's, so there's so many aspects of this that just makes me excited to help women kind of address all of those things. So it's nutrition, it's sleep, it's nervous system regulation, it's getting stress out of the body. Because I always thought I was an anxious person my whole life. I had no idea that I just didn't know how to get it out of my body. And once I did it, it goes away.
Yeah, I'm so like, there's so much gold here for people who aren't even women, let alone have had children, because, there's so many of us who are like barely functioning with anxiety or just like pushing through. And like, I love the science conversation, like the actual, like, here's what's going on in your body conversation, because I'm sure a lot of us are like, what the hell is wrong with me? Like, there's that, like, why am I like this? Why can't I just, especially if you have experienced in the past of being hypervigilant, overachiever, I know me, like I just pushed through.
Yeah.
Hell with what my body felt. I wasn't even aware of when I was hungry. I just pushed through. So now suddenly the needs of the body are so elevated that it's not mind over matter. And you can't do what you used to. So you feel broken, or like something's like mind over matter just doesn't work. So it's like that alone. I hope people just are able to give themselves some grace.
Yeah.
And look at like, no, it's not that something's wrong with you. It's just we're ignorant to how our body works.
That's right. Yeah. And we've also been so rewarded for pushing through and like hustle culture and all of that. And I do think people are more, as we're coming out of these past few years, I think people are more open to the fact that there's a different way of living. Because to your point, what I had with all the stress and everything, that can happen from anything. I think postpartum is absolutely a tipping point for a lot of women, though, where it's like, if you don't have a good foundation of like support in your life, of nervous system regulation, you have some unresolved trauma, this is a breaking point where it's suddenly you can't take care of yourself as much at all, and everything can kind of start being a domino effect. But it can be anyone having something big happen in their life, and it can affect them in this way. And a lot of menopausal women even get adrenal fatigue, because it's just hormone shifts. All of a sudden, your adrenals are now like running the show, not your ovaries. And so people, when women, when they go into menopause, don't realize that, like, why they're gaining weight around their stomach, or, and all of a sudden they can't lose it. It's that, like, relationship with cortisol as well.
Wow.
So it's like, if you're not living in an aligned way, even like you're, like I said, going to a job that gives you stress constantly, 8 to probably 10 hours a day, or, relationships are super toxic in your life, or like even just stuff like that will do it. So it's just coming back to your body and treating it like a friend that has just wanted to be your friend this whole time. I know I've seen that quote on Instagram a lot. It's like, it's like, you finally say to your body, like, okay, I want to listen to you now. I want to be your friend. And your body's like, ah, oh, yes, finally.
Finally. I think that comes for a lot of us when we step into motherhood too. I mean, because it's a shift that's required, because what's at risk if we don't is, I mean, because it's not just us anymore.
Yeah.
So it's required, both like the education side of it, figuring out how your body works. I mean, if you're used to hustle, and if you're attached to like the accolades that come with it, like you said, like society rewards that, then there's an identity shift in a number of ways. There's just so much unknown. And even if you are on top of all of this and like gung ho, a kid changes like their routine every 4 weeks, if that. Like, there's always a sleep regression. There's always some sort of thing, or then you add in daycare, and it's like, oh, another cold. We just got over one. Like, there is like the only thing that's consistent is inconsistency. So it's like, add all of that to the mix. You got to be super grounded in a way that allows you to be with all of it. And
my gosh, yes.
It's not, I mean, definitely hella hard to learn when you're pregnant and your body's not your own, when you are in newborn season. I mean, it's just, for anyone, wherever you are in your life right now as you're hearing this, like, just dig a little deeper. It's going to benefit you at some point. I mean, stressful moments later in life, like dealing with, like, I don't know, drastic moves, or moving stressful, or like parents getting sick, like all of these like big life things, or the world shutting down because of a pandemic. Like, it's do the due diligence to learn about how your body works. This is great for men too, to know, like, for the women in your life.
100%.
Like, that's what we go through.
Absolutely. And it does affect men too. Like, something I know we brought up, prenatal depression is maybe not talked about as much. Men going through some level of their own postpartum depression is real, because they're also having a huge identity shift. And it tends for them, like, to really, for us, we start kind of bonding with the baby while we're pregnant, right? For men, it's like as soon as that baby is born, it's like all of a sudden something changes for them too. And it's something that's near and dear to Matt's, my husband's heart, that it's not talked about or supported enough either. Of course, I mean, obviously they don't have the same hormonal things and physical healing, but it's a huge identity shift for them. And I've seen that downplayed, or, women say, well, you didn't give birth, so you don't deserve to feel that way. And that's not healthy either.
And there's also a societal thing there too, where, like, I think we're coming into the age of where it's okay for men to talk about their feelings. And I think more and more people are stopping that's weak, conversation, because that's old news and that doesn't serve anyone. Like, we're not even entertaining that anymore. And like you and I raising sons, for sure, like, embracing, like, space for all of it. Space for all of it. 100%. Where you're at now in this journey, talk to us a little bit about, like, what life is like now. I mean, I know just from my
Yeah.
experience being a human being, but also like coaching clients through a number of things, those old patterns come knocking,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But I think the more we lean into any kind of transformative work, like our how we respond to it starts to shift. So what happens when stress comes back into play or when you're tired or just like some of those things? How do
Yeah.
you respond now?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Just because I did a lot of like the work in like say 2021, 22, and this past year, healing never stops. I uncover new patterns. Like I have an EMDR therapist that I work with who I just love. If anyone's not familiar, so I think it's becoming more mainstream, but
Yeah.
it's eye movement desensitization and something's an R. I'm not remembering right now.
We'll add it somewhere.
Yes, we'll look it up. But it's you're thinking about kind of something that maybe is a trigger for you or traumatic, and and that stuff gets uncovered. Like you think, oh yeah, I can't think of anything else traumatic that comes up. Well, a new event comes up, and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, why am I feeling like this? Like so we talk through it, and as I kind of reprocess the event, I'm moving my eyes side to side, and until I get to this point where it's not triggering this huge stress response in my body to think about something. We actually just had I had a car accident a couple weeks ago, and nothing serious. It's okay, but I noticed my nervous system got
Yeah.
a little, because I'm definitely more prone to like this stuff could stick with me because of past trauma. And it was wonderful. I had my session with her the next day. It was already scheduled, and like we could talk through it. And I was just like, okay, when I think about it, my stress response is like a 7 out of 10. And because it just happened, I wasn't expecting it to go to 0. That doesn't feel
Right.
realistic, but we got it down to like a 2.
Nice.
And all of a sudden, I could kind of think of the event differently and
Yep.
understand that accidents happen. You can't control it. It is what it is. And that we're doing what we can, to just do the logistics of my car after. But yeah, so I just feel like I have the tools now. It doesn't mean stress doesn't happen.
Right.
Doesn't mean I have old patterns that there's still old patterns lingering. It doesn't mean there's nothing else to to fix for sure.
Yep.
And I mean, the beauty of my, kind of marriage is that in our vows, I mean, we even said like what we know is going to make this stick is that we always work through and evolve through these patterns together.
Beautiful.
Right. And so it's like you're in a relationships are like the biggest trigger for anything. And so it's like we'll find new things that trigger us all the time. But it's just, like we now have the tools to handle it in a healthy way. And I have my somatic practices that get stress literally out of my body, where, I do that before bed, and I can sleep the whole night through. And even if I wake up, I'll go back to sleep. Right. So that's the stuff I wish I knew, but I feel that there's no regret of that. How would I have known? Part of what I feel like is like such a big purpose in my life is to have realized that this system is so broken for women that we don't have the tools for it. And I'd like to change that. I mean, that's really that's the mission of Peace and Postpartum, right? And now I'm to the point where I feel like I can get back to kind of like, I know you mentioned manifesting mama when we were talking. I think there's these levels of healing where you got to make sure you at least have what you need to survive.
Yes.
There's like your nutrition, your sleep. I would even say like the next level up, you keep going up like a pyramid. And I kind of feel like I'm at the point where I want to start really intentionally creating my life again.
Yeah.
And like manifesting. I kind of see that as the top of the pyramid.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, I don't say all of this of my story as like doom and gloom and something to be scared about as being like a mom. It's like, I want to change this for women where, there's this kind of maiden to mother transition.
Mhm.
And so honestly, my ideal client would be someone who's not even pregnant yet.
Yeah.
And, so it's
100%.
like understand it when you can like fully be able to take in the information. I think most likely I will get pregnant women, and I
Mhm.
have gotten pregnant women, but the main client is definitely women who have already given birth and they don't feel well.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I'm in this place now of I can handle things when they happen. No, it's not perfect. I still have triggers of things that I continually heal, but now it's helping women to not only just survive, but get back to being able to be in a place to consciously create their life.
Yeah.
And, if you want to change careers, be able to change careers because
Mhm.
all of a sudden you're rebirthed and things don't suit you anymore.
Yep.
And it's not even just that, it's just anything about your
Anything.
life.
Mhm.
Um, so that's really where I'm at too. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I've
I
got
mean,
what I need to survive. I've got the tools to what my body needs. And
mhm.
now let's do more of the fun stuff, right?
Yeah, because you're braced, you have what you need to handle all of it. Like life
Mhm.
isn't always going to be just butterflies and rainbows. Life is going to be life.
Yep.
But having the tools is key. So for anyone who's in this place of it'll just be better when,
Yeah.
life
Yeah.
is going to life is going to do what it does.
Mhm.
So, work on getting your tools under you. And I do think we're at a really like our age here, our generation, I think we're a transition generation in terms of
Yes.
like we're the ones questioning how it's always been. We're the ones turning inward. We're the ones going a little slower,
Yes.
pausing, being willing to take the time and the space and give ourselves the grace and be curious and say, hey, that doesn't work for me. And, these all these practices you talked about, the coaches, somatic practices, like ED, I'm going to get the acronym wrong, but like
Yes.
all of the things, like I think like our age group, those are all necessary to undo. But also, like, what if those things were as consistent and expected as like brushing your teeth or taking
Yeah.
a bath, like as far
Yes.
as like our hygiene,
Yeah.
to have us grounded and able to exist in the world today.
Hmm.
That is high stress, high
Absolutely.
stress. So,
Yeah.
for anybody listening who's like, what is this junk? What is like this stuff? I don't need this, that, and the other thing. Okay, then you're likely gripping to an old belief system.
Hmm.
And that's fine. There's nothing wrong. And if there comes a point where that no longer works for you, we're here. Come say hello.
Right. Right.
Um, Thank you for like any of the women I bring on this podcast, like thank you for not being a gatekeeper. This is such vital information that could radically shift someone's life, but also like view of themselves, experience of their life, the ripple effect of that on their families, their children, children's children. It's important and a gift. So thank you for putting a voice to it, for creating something to pass on. I mean, I could see, yeah, you're maybe the common client coming to you as somebody who's in the thick of it.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
once they start learning, like, oh, I wish I knew when, back then. I'm excited for the day when your client roster is a lot of women who aren't even pregnant yet
Yeah. Yeah.
doing the work.
That's what I'm manifesting right now.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Anything else you want to share in the space? Like the floor is yours. I mean, you've
Yeah.
shared so much gold today that I think is just like, like I said, transcends motherhood and women and whatnot, and it's just
Well,
so
thank you.
informational. But we'll link all your things where people can find you. We'll link the resources and the people you shared today. I want to bring this up just because I think it's a special connection. But like people who know me know that like my grandmother's a big part of my story, and I know your grandmother is so important to you. So do you want to share
Oh, yeah.
anything regarding her?
Yeah. So I'd love to, we can link to my free guide I have of just like kind of the different stages of healing and postpartum that,
Hmm.
and I bring that up because it was named after my grandma. My oldest cousin couldn't say, I think he like couldn't say her name or something. And he said Re. So we always called her Re, like RE. And so my guide it's called the Re's, and it's all these different things that we have to kind of go through. But yes, and tomorrow is the anniversary of when she passed away. So this is just a special time period, and she always comes up in my work.
I like that. They just can't help themselves.
They can't help themselves, no, because I remember her always saying, because she was a 50s housewife.
Mm-hmm.
She was just saying how lucky I was that like I could go and have this career and like go work and do all these things that she always wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And but then it's like there's this double-edged sword, because part of me is like, well, I want to be home with my kid and not feel the pressures that I do now. And I think you can have both. You can have it,
Yep.
the balance in your life exactly as you want to.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what, to me, like this next kind of manifesting course and group is really about. It's like creating the exact motherhood and life experience you want to have. I'm revamping my initial course just with, I keep learning all the time. So I'm going to keep making it better and better.
Yep.
I hope that's the hope.
Yeah.
So I'd love for anyone who's interested in anything we talked about today to check that out. My goal is to make things very accessible. I've definitely noticed a trend of, mothers not necessarily being used to investing in themselves
For sure.
or in general.
There's we could talk for an hour about the word selfish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So my goal is definitely make things as accessible as possible. But yeah, I think one of the last things I'll say as well is something you brought up. It's not just about us anymore.
Yeah.
And so even when you feel like, oh, I can't spend money on myself for learning about this or whatever it is, I think that's the important key piece of this. Like if the mother is depleted and dysregulated, what childhood experience are we giving our children? Because guaranteed a lot of our own parents were depleted and dysregulated, and that leads to our own trauma, and and it's just such a cascading effect of how, if we don't have the mother supported well, how that affects the entire family and your relationships and all of it. So it's worth doing, and I'm trying to make that as accessible as possible.
Yeah. It's worth doing, and I think we're at a point where this is required.
Yeah.
This is required. Like I don't think tools like this, if they didn't exist like they do now for our mothers, for our mothers' mothers.
Yeah.
And they exist now. Yeah. So, for the sake of legacy and our children and what's to come, like for me, this is no question. Yeah, this is the work. I want to see this kind of stuff on people's registries.
Yes. I was just about to say that, like add it to a registry.
Yeah, because like as much as we all want to get the cute clothes and the books and the thing, that's all part of it. And the support. And not just the support, leading up to or the month after, but like this postpartum period lasts a while.
It's about 6 to 7 years is what I don't think that's not very well known, but that's how long it's been now studied that the body is still changing and adjusting from birth.
Yeah.
So saying postpartum, it doesn't, a lot of people interchangeably say postpartum and they just mean depression. And it's like, no, postpartum is a very sacred time period. There's early postpartum, right? And then I'm still in late postpartum, and my son is 3 and almost 3.5.
Yep. Thank you so much, Lauren, for being here. Like, oh my gosh, you're such a light, beautiful conversation. So important. So important. Oh, I'm just honored to hold the mic for you here. And we can chat again anytime. Again, I feel like there were like 10 different rabbit holes we could have gone down.
No.
We'll come back. We'll come back.
Yes, I'd love to come back.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So great. For our guests here listening, please, if there's something that spoke to you, drop it in the comment. Clearly, this is a conversation that we want to keep going, and that only happens with participation and continued communication. So otherwise, stay tuned for another episode. Thanks for being here.